Hi, Andy XL, back with another NFXL podcast. And with the college and NFC seasons done and dusted, I thought I would give you an early heads up on who the leading contenders to go early in the 2026 draft are, as those teams that had disappointing ends to their season or just disappointing seasons in general, and those teams seeking to stay at the top, look to the draft to augment their rosters. I will do this by position and let you know where the contenders stand on my current big board. And in essence, this forms my top 125 draft prospects as of now, the 11th of February, which is when I'm recording this. So let's get into it, starting with the quarterbacks. Now, I see this as a pretty substandard draft class at quarterback. I've said that several times and I'm still sticking to it. And it is entirely possible that just one goes in round one, and that will be with the first overall pick. But I will list five who I think have a chance of going early in this draft for teams that cannot resist the temptation to reach for their answer at quarterback. Because I think anything outside, well, I think generally teams are going to be reaching for quarterbacks this off-season. So, with Dante Moore opting out of this draft, Fernando Mendoza is the clear top quarterback in this class and seems sure to go with the first overall pick. Whether that's to the Raiders or whether they decide to trade out of that position, we're yet to see. I mean, the odds on that it looks like the Raiders at the moment, but I'm still not convinced they wouldn't trade out of that and stick with Geno Smith for another season. So my top five quarterbacks and their overall big ball position. Number one is Mendoza out of Indiana, as I say, at number one on my big board. Even though I don't think he's the best player, I think he's almost certain to go at one. Number two is Ty Simpson out of Alabama. Now, I'm lower than him and most people at 35. I've got Carson Beck out of Miami at 82, Trinidad Chambliss out of Ole Miss at 87, and Garrett Nussmeier out of LSU at 88 on my big board. So five in the top 88. But I'll go through each of them. So I've done Mendoza. I have Simpson, as I said, lower on my board as he lacks experience and I've not been impressed with him this season. I would not be surprised if he even failed to make it into round two, yet alone round one. Um, but with Moore having opted out and Trinidad Chambliss draft status uncertain, he does have a shot at being the quarterback two in this class. And as I say, with teams likely to reach, that could even get him into round one, although I think that would be, I would criticise a team who did that, but never mind, let's see what happens. As I say, Chambliss, well, he has made it clear he doesn't really want to be in this draft. As a 1 year starter at Old Miss, he is almost certainly right that he needs more experience and he might earn more money for that before being ready to be an NFL starter. But teams like the Rams, Steelers, or Cardinals might be able to redshirt him behind a veteran in 2026. Now, he's taking the NCAA to court, and that hearing is set for February the 12th, i.e., tomorrow. So we may know more after that about his draft status. Beck, well, he has the experience and of late seems to have learned how not to throw costly picks in big situations. His talent has never been in doubt for me, and after a strong season, I would actually make a case for him being the quarterback two in this class, particularly if Chambliss isn't in it. Garrett Nussmeier, right, he's the fifth one. He's another who has not impressed me like Simpson um, in Nussmeier's case at LSU, but he did well at the Senior Bowl, and he is in a group competing to be the second or third quarterback taken in this draft as a result. And as I say, I can see teams reaching for quarterbacks, so he could well go earlier than I anticipate. Right, quick sip of coffee. And then we'll move on to running backs. Now, I've got the top six here. So six appear in my top 125. They're Jeremiah Love out of Notre Dame, who's at 7. Jadarian Price, who's another running back out of Notre Dame at 49. Jonah Coleman out of Washington at 75. The Nebraska Cornhusker, Emmett Johnson, is at 86. And then we've got two Penn State Nittany Lions, Katron Allen at 91 and Nick Singleton at 109. Love is one of the outstanding talents in this class. He will go early in round one, and whoever gets him will have one of the best backs in the NFL from day one, as far as I'm concerned. You know, Aston Johnson got a lot of criticism last year, but for even though he wasn't even in the voting, for me he was offensive rookie of the year behind that O line, that awful O line at the Raiders. Um, so he was a good talent. There's been plenty of good running backs come out recently, and Love's another one in that category. Jadarian Price was Love's backup for the Fighting Irish, and as such had limited opportunities, but he did enough to show that he may well be the second best back in this class. But there are teams from pick 20 onwards in round one who might want to take a running back, but having missed out on Love, could take the next best option, which would make Price the most likely beneficiary of such a move. Coleman, Johnson, and the two Nittany Lions backs look set to compete to be the third running back taken right now. So let's move on to wide receivers. Right, I've got no less than 19 in my top 125 in what looks like a pretty deep class. But this goes down them in order of how they appear. Mackay Lemon out of USC is 9 on my big ball. Carnell Tate, Ohio State, is 12. Jordan Tyson, Arizona State, 14. Denzel Boston, Washington, 22. Kevin Casey Concepcion, Texas A&M, 26. Zachariah Branch, Georgia, 40. Jeremy Bernard, Alabama, 44. Chris Bell, Louisville, 45. And then the Indiana guys, Omar Cooper at 50 and Elijah Sarrett at 59. Chris Brazzell out of Tennessee is dropped to 63. Malachi Fields is at 70. Jacoby Lane's another one slipping down the big board at 78 out of USC. Clemson's Antonio Williams is at 80. Dion Burks at Oklahoma is 89. Old Miss, Dezorn Stribling, 112. Mississippi State's Brennan Thompson at 117. Connecticut's Skylar Bell, 121. And finally, CJ Daniels out of Miami at 122. Now, Tyson, Lemon, and Tate may well all go in the early to mid part of round one. And it's just down to what type of receiver the wide receiver needy teams are looking for that will decide which order they go in. 2 or 3 more could go late in round one. 5 or 6 teams from pick 24 onwards are teams in those spots who could all do with wide receiver help. And any of those listed in my top 14 down to Antonio Williams could even find a way into round one. So let's move on to tight ends. Got 7 here. Kenyon Sadiq of Oregon is at 17. Eli Stowers of Vanderbilt Commodore is at 60. Michael Trigg, the Baylor Bear, is at 67. Ohio State's Max Clare is at 74. Justin Jolie at NC State at 105. Jack Endries out of Texas, 119. And Cincinnati Bearcat Joe Royer is at 120. In truth, Sadiq is the only round one tight end prospect in this class. But if a team late in round one like Stowers, Trigg or Clare and has missed out on Sadiq, they may reach for them. But it seems more likely those 3 will compete to be the tight end 2 in this draft and go on to A2. Jolie, Endry and Royer all have a chance of a day 2 pick as well, but they might be competing for 1 or 2 spots there. Right, interior O-lineman. 8 here. Olive Vega Ione, a guard out of Penn State, is at 15. Emmanuel Pregnon, a guard out of Oregon, is 42. Chase Bizontes, a guard out of Texas A&M, is at 47. Connor Liu, the center out of Auburn, is at 55. Florida Gators center Jake Slaughter is at 85. Iowa center Logan Jones is at 95. Billy Schrouth, the guard from Notre Dame, is at 106, and Armaj Reed Adams, the guard from Texas A&M. So both 2 guards from A&M are in here. He's at 118. Excuse me. As indicated by their big ball positions, Ione will probably be the only one, and if at most 2 inside a interior offensive lineman taken in round one. A centre-needy team may take one of Liu, Slaughter or Jones earlier than the guards go, just out of positional need. So on to offensive tackles. And 13 make my 125 here. Starting with Spencer Fano out of Utah at 4, Francis Mauigoa, Miami 6, Caden Proctor, Alabama 19, another Utah guy, Caleb Lomo at 20, Monroe Freeling out of Georgia 31, Clemson's Blake Miller at 38, Jenny Dunker of Iowa 52, Maxi Anacha, Arizona State 53, Caleb Tiernan from Northwestern at 69, Oregon's Isaiah Weld at 76, Austin Barber of Florida at 94, Brian Parker II out of Duke at 102, and Penn State's Drew Shelton at 111. Now, Fano has worked his way to the top spot in this class ahead of Mauigoa, and both stand a very good chance of going in the top half of round one. Proctor and Loma also look like round one candidates, with Freeland and Blake Miller, who both seem to be on the rise draft stock wise, possibly challenging them for those selections. Of the others, Iheanacho is another who's building some positive vibes ahead of the draft, but the others look more like round two probables or possibles in the case of Weld, Barber, Parker, and Shelton. Defensive tackles, right? We've got 12 here, starting with Peter, but none in the top 20. Peter Woods is my top ranked one currently out of Clemson at 24, and he's one of five closely matched together. Cade McDonald, Ohio State at 28, Lee Hunter of Texas Tech at 30, Caleb Banks of Florida at 33, and Kristen Miller of Georgia at 36. Then we get a gap to Demonique Orange out of Ohio State at 77, Darrell Jackson of Florida State at 81, Dante Corleone, got to be called the Godfather at Cincinnati, is 90, Grayson Horton of Oklahoma, 113, Trey Zorn, who's an Aggie, is at 115, Mizzou's Chris McClellan is at 116, and Alabama's Tim Keenan is at 124. Wood seems to be on the slide draft stock wise. He was top 10 at one stage and is now falling to the back end of round one. So that makes this an open contest to be the first defensive tackle taken in this draft. Excuse me. All five of those listed between 24 and 36 on my big board have a chance to be that man. And as such, all have a chance of being first round pick. Those five, like I say, are clear of the rest of this class, who will have a shot at being the defensive tackle 6, but all could go later rather than earlier on day 2, if they get into day 2 at all. So if you want one of those top 5, you may need to go early on day 2 to get them, depending on how many go late on day 1. Right, let's move on to one of the other really strong classes, the edge rusher class, or the edge class. This is defensive ends and outside linebackers grouped together. So let's run down the list. David Bailey, Texas Tech, is at 3 on my big board. Reuben Bain, Miami, is at 5. Keldrick Falk of Auburn, it's at 16. Cassius Howell of Texas A&M at 23. Miami's Akeem Messidor at 27. TJ Parker of Clemson at 32. R. Mason Thomas of Oklahoma at 39. Zion Young at Mizzou, 33. Joshua Josephs out of Tennessee, 48. Texas Tech's Romello Height at 58. LT Overton out of Alabama, 62. Michigan Wolverine Derek Moore at 64. Illinois' Gabe Jackas at 65. Danny Dennis Sutton of Penn State at 68. Anthony Lucas of USC at 97. Malachi Lawrence from Small School Central Florida at 104. And Ohio State's Caden Curry at 114. As I say, this is one of the best positional classes in this draft. As many as 6 or 7 could go in round 1, bringing all those onto this list into the round 1 possibility sphere. Well, not quite. I think all of my top 8 have a chance of getting into round 1, though. Bailey is one who scouts seem to be falling in love with, and he is vaulted above Bain, who is another outstanding prospect at the top of this class. The next 6 will fight to get into round 1, as I say, but with at least 14 likely to go in the first 2 days, those that miss out on round 1 will not be waiting long on day 2. Let's move on to inside linebacker, and we've got a dozen in the top 125 here, which is a high number for inside linebacker. It starts with a highly rated Arvell Reese out of Ohio State at 2, then a second Buckeye, Sonny Styles at 33, CJ Allen out of Georgia at 29, Anthony Hill, the Texas Longhorn at 41, Cincinnati's Jake Golday at 57, Texas Tech's Jacob Rodriguez at 72, Deontay Lawson of Alabama at 73, Josiah Trotter of Missouri at 84, Taurian York of Texas A&M at 99, Joshua Barham of Michigan at 108, LSU's Harold Perkins at 110, and Kyle Lewis of Pittsburgh at 123. Now, not many inside linebackers tend to go in round 1, but this is another strong positional class, and it may even see 3 go in the opening round in 2026. Reese will likely go early, and Styles should go in the top to mid half of round 1. And 1 or 2, even 2 more may join them late in round 1. And 5 or 6 could go on round 2 in what is going to be an exceptional year at inside linebacker, I think. So let's move on to safety. 8 here. Caleb Downs of Ohio State at 8. Emmanuel McNeil Warren from Toledo at 25, another small school guy doing well. Dylan Thieneman of Oregon at 37. AJ Halsey at LSU 61. Kamari Ramsey out of USC at 71. Zachy Wheatley of Penn State at 92. Genesis Smith of Arizona at 96. And Michael Taff of Texas at 103. Like inside linebacker, safeties don't generally go in round one unless they are exceptional, but that is another trend that may not be followed here. Downs is another of the elite talents in this draft. McNeil, Warren, and Thieneman are also possibly worthy of round one consideration, whilst Halsey and Ramsey should go on day two, along with one or two more. And let's finish off with cornerbacks because I've not covered kickers yet because none of them make my top 125. Surprise, surprise. So let's have a look at the cornerbacks and a long list here, 18. So starts with Mansour Delaney out of LSU at 10, Jamel McCoy at Tennessee at 11. Those two will compete to be the first cornerback likely to go off this board. Then we've got another group of Avion Terrell of Clemson at 18, Colton Hood of Tennessee at 21, and Brendan Cisse of South Carolina at 34. They all have a chance of getting into round one. Then we've got another more depth coming in Chris Johnson of San Diego State at 44, Keith Abney of Arizona State at 51, Keontae Scott of Miami at 54, D'Angelo Pons of Indiana at 56, Julian Neal of Arkansas at 66. They're the ones most likely to make it into round two. Then the other day two possibles, Davison Igbonison of Ohio State is at 79 on my big board. Malik Muhammad of Texas is at 83. Jalen Kilgore of South Carolina is at 93. Chandler Rivers of Duke is at 98. Will Lee of Texas A&M is at 100. Dalen Everett of Georgia at 101. Devin Moore from Florida 107. And Damani Jackson out of Alabama 125. So this is another class with 3 or 4 round one prospects, as I say, maybe even more. If they all go early, that could encourage teams late in round one to take one of the others as their best option after Delaney and McCoy have gone. 5 in each of rounds 2 or 3, or maybe even more than that, could make it into a busy day two for cornerbacks in this draft. So there you go. There's my positional rankings and top 125 as of February the 11th, done and dusted. I'll try and update that and expand on this as we get into early March. Maybe I'll go to my top 150 or even 200 next. But stay tuned to my podcast because coming up, I'm going to try and do about 2 or 3 a day in the coming week or so, week and 10, week or fortnight, where I'm going to go through all 32 teams as of the end of the NFL season and look at the state of the franchise and what they might need to do either via this draft or via free agency to improve their prospects for 2026. All right, stay tuned for that and future draft updates because, as I've said before, if you want the most accurate source of where players are going to go in this draft, not necessarily to which team, but around what spot in the draft they might go, stay tuned to me. All right, see you soon.